All right, this week in Exercise Science Lab, we're talking about the movement pattern stepping along with a single leg stance. So essentially talking about any sort of single leg stance, here, okay? We can talk about what the differences are, and then a stepping pattern. I have a 12-inch box here, up, down, all right? So first we talk about an everyday move. The everyday move is walking steps, walking up steps and down steps. For me to take a step up, I need to stand on this one leg for a little bit before I put this leg down, and then as I go forward, I gotta drive on this top leg now and go up to the front leg. So a lot of these assessments, we just do everyday moves and we slow them down and say, okay, I need the strength and balance on one leg, the strength and balance on the other leg, and vice versa. Okay, so I love this move. I do it with everyone because whether I have a 78-year-old like I did this morning who I saw who fell on her front porch, she walked outside a little quickly, she was looking at the plant she was going to water, she had a pitcher of water in her hands, she wasn't thinking about the depth of the step that she was stepping off of, and she fell. Thankfully she's strong and durable because she exercises a few days a week, that she was able to get up, just bruised up a little bit but moved well today. But that's the importance of being mindful with this movement, okay? So that's your everyday moves, standing and stepping up and over something, all right? Your ADL, we apply this to some exercises. ADL is activities of daily living. That's always important to keep in mind also if you're working with a client or a patient. Typically, while everyday moves are just things that most of us are doing every day, walking up and down your porch steps, your stairs steps, stepping over a baby gate, something like that. If you're a soccer player, maybe you're doing your open the gate and close the gates. A lot of these things on single leg. Maybe you're stepping on one foot to kick. All right, requires a lot of balance. If you're right-footed, your balance is better on your left foot. Activities of daily living are more things that they might use. If you're a physical therapist, you might be assessing someone to see what level of assisted care they may require in a retirement home, an assisted living home, and something like that. So can they get up and down from a chair, from the toilet? Can they shower themselves, clean themselves, cook for themselves, drive a car, things like that, okay? So some of these patterns will apply to those things and we'll talk about that. All right, let's go through some joint movements, actions, and planes and functional anatomy. So let's get into our kinesiology. If I'm gonna stand on one leg, my bottom leg on the floor is my closed kinetic chain. All right, this is my open kinetic chain because the end of the chain is open. All right, I am flexing my hip in the sagittal plane. Flexion, extension occur in the sagittal plane, forward and backwards. So as you go up into this position, let that foot dangle a little bit. Sometimes we lock into this position, and if I'm doing some sort of power skip, that might be appropriate, but let that ankle be a little bit loose, so when you hit, you have some good mobility there in order to absorb that shock, change direction, run forward, etc. All right? So sagittal plane motion mostly here in an isotonic way, right? What does isotonic mean? That is your concentric contraction or your eccentric contraction. So again, if I raise my right leg, I am going to concentrically contract my right hip flexors, my psoas, my iliacus, my rectus femoris, maybe a little bit of my tensor fasciae lata, my sartorius, all right? But mostly think rectus femoris, psoas, and iliacus. Those are my primary hip flexors. They're gonna flex my right hip into sagittal plane, all right? So that's all sagittal plane motion, whether I'm standing here and going forward. There is some frontal plane motion, is that right when I go into a unilateral stance, remember 2 feet is bilateral, 1 foot is unilateral, I need to stabilize my hips. If I drew a line, horizontal line from ASIS to ASIS, anterior superior iliac spine, right? If I drew a line across there and my hips dropped, all right, that would be a sign that maybe my glutes, my abductors on this outer lateral side aren't working as well. Maybe my adductors aren't firing or is strong enough to support myself in my inner thigh on that closed kinetic chain side, or my contralateral to my closed kinetic chain, quadratus lumborum, my QL on my opposite side isn't firing quite enough. So this isn't just, well, I have good balance or not. When we talk about balance and vestibular balance, things like that, 3 components are dictating how well my balance is going to work at any particular moment. One is my vision. So I'm looking at a camera, I see myself on a screen, and I can stare at something on a wall. My vision is going to help me a lot with my balance, maybe 10%. Another 20%, maybe 25% is my inner ear. All right, my inner ear bones that kind of balance there. All right, so that's going to help me as well. All right, but a good 70, 80% is going to be my bones, my muscles, my nervous system, my proprioceptors, right? So if I go into this position and I begin to fall a little bit, these muscles will stretch, the muscle spindles will be contracted or activated, and they'll help me kind of pull back into this position. All right, so they're constantly at work. That's where your balance is coming from. So a lot of things at play. I'm moving, flexing, extending in the sagittal plane, but I'm stabilizing in the frontal plane. So I can kind of absorb that every time I'm skipping, running, jogging, etc. All right, now tests in the rehab setting. The primary one I just sort of talked about is what we call the Trendelenburg test. If someone comes in and maybe they have an excessive twitch, the lower back is bothering them, you've kind of ruled them out for any kind of vision or inner ear problems. So you're going to look at their musculature and see how well they balance, especially in the frontal plane in a unilateral, position. You're going to stand on one leg. Typically look at them from behind. You can kind of see the balance of their hips a little better without their knee. And if they do fall, that's a failed Trendelenburg test. All right. I say fail, it's not exactly pass fail, right? Because there's going to be sort of a spectrum or a gauge of how weak that muscle is or how well it's holding on. Maybe they could stabilize for 5 seconds, but then they begin to fall. Okay. The other very general test in the personal training setting I would do is a 20-second test per leg. Now, how well can someone stand in this position here? All right. Now, I've been doing this single leg stance in this position just like this with one leg forward. I'm also in a contralateral position, right? So as my right knee comes forward, my left arm comes forward. That's a natural walking position. My opposite arm and leg go forward at the same time to create balance, okay? That's contralateral. If I brought my right knee up with my right hand, that's ipsilateral, right? Which we can work on that as well. If I do a standing, let's say, dumbbell press, or in basketball, if I do a right-handed layup, I'm gonna jump off of my left foot and do a right-handed layup, right? So that's my contralateral side, meaning I'm gonna drive off my left foot and then drive up with my right hand, okay? So ipsilateral, contralateral, be sure that you know those terms, all right? So now, as we begin to regress or progress single leg stance, let's say you're gonna work this into your programming for your clients, for your patients, for your own training, your athletic training, or just your orthopedic durability training at home, maybe a break from the desk chair. You can start again, stand on one foot, but the difference is what we do is instead of just standing on one foot, stand on one foot and put that foot in front of you a little bit, hold that knee up or just kind of bring that foot in front of you. How does that feel here? So from the side, I'm gonna go here, okay? And then bring that foot behind you. How does your balance look like this? Because what you're gonna do is you're gonna shift your center of gravity back onto your hips. You're gonna light up your lower back muscles a little bit. How does this feel here? And then again in the frontal plane, which is side to side, abduction, adduction, I'm gonna put my foot out to the side and hold that position there. All right? And so just play with those three. So foot out in front of you, out to the side, and then forward. And then we can actually we can progress from there into steps where I'm gonna step to the front so I can act like I am standing on the center of a clock and I'm gonna step to 12 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 6 o'clock. All right? Switch legs. 12 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 6 o'clock, or 9 o'clock, I guess, right? So that's a progression there. And then I can do the same thing up on a step where I can work on, I do this with a lot of clients. Step down like you're stepping off a curb, a car comes by, come back up. Step down, and then come back up. All right? Then I can step out to the side and come back up. So we can just advance this then. All right, you have a higher level athlete. Now we're doing a 12-inch step. All right, so step down, staying in the sagittal plane. Okay, if we wanted to bring in the frontal and transverse plane, we would turn this regular step back in the sagittal plane into a crossover step back. Now I'm getting some adduction, flexion, and internal rotation of my right hip joint. So when I drive up, I'm getting extension, abduction, and external rotation of that hip joint. All right? So a lot of things we can knock out there. Then, whether we just go higher into a higher step back, this turns into quick feet work, whether you're on a soccer ball on a soccer field, or you're working on your single leg vertical and driving up. we can advance this in a lot of things. So again, we can take our older clients and work on just some very basic balance. If you sprain your ankle, you're rehabbing an ankle. Another rehab setting example is redeveloping some of that proprioceptive balance within your ankle joint. Remember, that's going to be in your tendons and your ligaments and your muscles all around your ankles. So that's a great exercise to do. That swelling's down a little bit. It's been a couple days, and you can work into that. Okay? A joint by joint approach, 2 more things, and then programming 101. Your joint by joint approach with single leg balance. We will get in a stepping pattern. Well, we've already done some of that. Stepping pattern. I'm out of breath. See, a little bit of a workout already. Your stepping pattern, your joint by joint approach. When I do this forward step, you can watch my ankle, my closed chain ankle, has to go from 90 degrees to about 40 or 45 degrees. I need mobility in my ankle joint, right? So mobility in my ankle joint, more stability in my knee joint. So if I do one, let's say out to the side like this, I'm gonna step out. I need to stabilize kind of where my knee is so then I can bring my hips back. All right, so when we talk about the joint by joint, you need some mobility in your ankle, a little more stability around the knee area, and then some mobility in the hip area so you can move a little bit more isotonically in deflection, stabilizing the frontal plane, etc. All right, so we get a little bit into joint by joint theory and approach in different exercises we do. All right. The programming 101, I mix this into either, if you're going to do barbell squats as a heavy bilateral movement, you can work some unilateral movement into your exercise. All right. If you're just going to do unilateral movement and warm up for the day, this is a wonderful progression in programming warm up. Right. Just to start with hitting your clock drills, check in with your knees, your ankles. Watch that contralateral form. So if I drive my left foot back, my left foot will come forward, or my left hand will come forward, all right? Then elevate that to 4 inches, and then 12 inches, and you can go up from there, all right? So that then turns into all my stepping patterns. Then after I got that movement down, proprioception is back, my balance is feeling good, then you can load this pattern. So after working on your unloaded pattern, then we get into a loaded pattern with the dumbbell, barbell on your shoulders, holding 2 kettlebells, wearing a weight vest, things like that. So we always begin with your posture being nice and tall. Your position is a single leg stance position. Then we go into an unloaded pattern. So posture, position, pattern, and then we go into a loaded pattern by making it more intense. All right? So I believe we knocked out all your planes, your functional anatomy. A little bit more there. If we go back, if I'm going to step back like this, it's going to be a hip dominant move. If my hips here, if this is my anatomical position, if I step back, my hips are going back, I'm going to stretch my glutes. My gluteal maximus most, my gluteal medius will be working some as well, my gluteus medius, and then my hamstrings will be secondary, my secondary hip extender. All right? If I do that forward step, going here, now because my knee is bending some, my gastrocnemius that attaches above my knee, there's going to be a little slack in the system there, so it's going to be mostly a soleus exercise. I think the soleus is kind of undertrained, but it's vital. Your soleus supplements knee extension. So if you're working on your vertical, if you're working on your deceleration to a jump, a high jump, a layup, walking up and down steps, whatever that is, your soleus is key, but we don't just train your soleus necessarily unless you need to build it up in an isolated way with like seated calf raises. This is a great way where I can work soleus like here along with knees. I can step backwards and load my knee this way, or I can step forward and bring my hips back, and I'm going to get triple flexion followed by triple extension. We talked about triple extension in class being your hip extension, knee extension, ankle plantar flexion. All right? So there's your functional anatomy, your kinesiology, your rehab setting, joint by joint, your variations, some regressions and progressions. Use that in your programming, know it for your class. If you're studying for any kind of personal training class, all these things you need to know as well. All right? Good luck, keep training. Comment below if you have any questions about any of those things, and I'll see you next time in the Exercise Science Lab.